And the scholars at the time said you couldn't do it, couldn't be done. They actually said that the human body was incapable of running that fast. And so the belief was that it couldn't be done. And yet as the people began inching closer, the scientists said, well, maybe it could be done, but it would need a few things. It would need perfect conditions. You'd have to have a clay track with no moisture. You'd have to have no breeze at all. And you'd have to have probably 40,000 people in the auditorium or stadium to, shouting and cheering to send energy to that person. And then, and maybe then, it could be done. You see, in 1954, Roger Bannister decided to make an attempt. The day that he decided to run, there was a breeze blowing. Now the breeze subsided and almost stopped. But the ground was still damp. It was a clay track, but it was slightly damp. And there was only 1,200 people in the auditorium, or in the crowd. Nowhere near the number needed, but Roger decided that he would give an attempt. You see, there was another runner named John Landy from Australia who was also getting very close to the record. So Roger Bannister made the attempt, and after he got through the third lap, the time was 3 minutes and 1 second. He had 58 seconds left to win the race. Now it's interesting what he said. He said that as he was running that last race, he imagined, he used his mind, his mindset, he used his belief system. He imagined that there were bullets flying past him, that he was in the middle of a battle at war. And he was running, not to break a record, but he was running for his life. Anyway, he crossed the finish line, and the cheer from the crowd was so loud, even though there was only such a few number, that you couldn't actually hear the score, like the time when it was announced. The time ended up being 3 minutes, 4 minutes, didn't win, 3 minutes 59.4. He had broken the record. He had done that which was impossible to do. And yet he believed it was possible. Now when it comes to winning the game of relationships, we can do the same thing. We need to have an outstanding belief system. You see, I think about the game of relationships this way. I think of it like a game. G-A, this isn't a great pen, is it? See, I think about G as getting a big enough Y. Like, get a big enough Y. Is that right? H. We need to get a big enough Y. We need to decide why we want it, whatever it is. You see, Roger Bannister decided that he wanted to break that record to perhaps be famous, to perhaps prove to himself that he could do it, to prove to others that he wasn't a failure. He came in 4th at the Olympics. He came back with that iron will because he felt the failure. He wanted to succeed. Perhaps that was it. We don't know what drove him. But he had a big enough why. He pushed himself and he made himself do those things which were uncomfortable until they became comfortable and natural. So the first thing we need to do in relationships is to get a big enough why. Like, why do you want a phenomenal relationship? Or do you want one? Do you want an average one, a good one, or do you want a great one or a phenomenal one? We've got to decide why we want it. Now, if it's a phenomenal relationship, why do you want that? Why not just an average one? Why do you want a phenomenal one? So number one, just think about that. Why do you want it? Why do you want it? So the next one is adopt a winning psychology. Adopt a winning psychology. It's the second thing that Roger did. Was he decided that he would create that iron will. That's what we do. We decide what we want, why we want it. Then we create an iron will to go for it. We decide it's that or nothing. You see, the word decide means to cut off from any other option. I spoke at the beginning about the faith continuum. If we have absolute knowledge and total conviction that we will have a phenomenal relationship, That's going to help us get there. Now, it may require some work. It may require some self-development, some study. It may require reading lots of books, learning, and this is where the next bit comes in. The next thing we need to do is master the rules. Master the rules. Get a big enough why, adopt a winning psychology. The next one is master the rules. And nobody handed you a rule book and said, here are the rules of relationship, here's what you need to do. There actually are books written. There's a book that I read just about 2 weeks ago that was about the rules of relationship. There was 85 rules in there. And I thought, well, that's not many. But how long would it take to master them all? To become really good, adept at each one of them. It's a lot of work. But we can master the rules of relationship. Now, I start with the biggest rules. You see, the biggest rules are, and if you think about relationships, there's several things that we've got. I'll use this pen over here, push a bit harder. So what we've got is, see, when you first meet somebody and you're having a laugh and a chat together, what you're doing is you're entering the space of cliches. I think it's like that, cliches. Okay, we have a laugh and it's all small talk. It's very shallow. You know, cliches is where it starts. We get to know someone, get to meet somebody. Ask 2 or 3 questions. We really don't know the person. We don't have no idea really who they are, only what they've told us they are. And only what maybe you felt as they were talking to you, whether you built rapport with them or not. You've just gone through cliches. But then after that, we can get a bit more serious and we can start discussing facts. Start discussing facts. I had a friend when I was growing up who became a hairdresser. He went from truck driver to hairdresser, quite a contrast. But he would read the Saturday and Sunday Mail from cover to cover. So he had plenty to talk about through the week with all his clients. He would go in there and speak to them about the different things happening in the world. And he found that he was able to build good relationships because he wanted to go beyond cliches. Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Talk about more serious things. Talk about some facts. Now, if that's all you've got, it's not enough. Because the next thing, when we start to get to know people, we start talking about opinions. Now, here's where we start to really get to know somebody. Start talking about their opinions. And what are your thoughts on this? How do you feel about that? This is where we start going a bit deeper. True? Yeah, you start to really find out, and this is where you go, you know what, your opinions on those are way different from mine. Religion, we're very different. Or it could be politics, whatever's important to you. And if there's a big, vast difference in the way they see the world and see things, this is where you're going to find it. You're not going to find it here in cliches and facts. That's why they say relationships, but that start on a one-night stand, very rarely work. You might have a lot in common at these first 2 levels. We can talk about facts. We can talk about cliches, but as soon as you start bringing your opinions out, then you go, whoa, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. It's a whole different ballgame. We start talking about values and different things like that. Values, beliefs. But we can go deeper. We can go much deeper than this. Because what we do is then we go down to feelings. Go from opinions down to feelings. Now we're getting deep. Now you're starting to find out what the person really feels. Okay, if you listen, if you're attentive, if you're watching, you can start to develop that ability to discern what's going on with them, what's happening. And you may not be right, but you start to look and listen and use your eyes and your mind and your heart, and you say, what's happening here? And more questions. How do you feel about this? What's going on? And this is often times where some people don't want to go. Because it can be a good thing, but it can also be very painful. And so some people shut down their feelings. They move back to opinions. Or they shut down opinions and they say, we can just talk about the weather. That's it. That's the depth of our relationship. That's all we can have. But if you really want a phenomenal relationship, you've got to go beyond these 2. Opinions, feelings, and you've got to go down to needs. You've got to get all the way down to needs. This is the only place where relationships will flourish. is when you meet the other person's needs. Not your own needs. That's their job. See, in a relationship, it's very different. You see, for yourself, you meet your own needs. But in a relationship, to be really good, adept, excellent in relationships, you meet the other person's needs. You first discover what those needs are, then you go about to meet them. Now you might say, well, I did that in my last relationship, but I was with somebody who didn't. And that's a difficult thing. That makes it very difficult if you're meeting their needs. Or are you meeting your needs? Are you really meeting their needs? Are those things their needs, or are they your needs? Or are they what you think their needs are? This gets confusing, doesn't it? So are we really meeting their needs? But that's it. Is that interesting? Yeah. And so the way to really have a phenomenal relationship is to meet the needs of the other person. You might ask, well, what are their needs? You know, I've come up with some simple ones, and these are not exclusive. But there's needs of the masculine and needs of the feminine. And what are they? The masculine, what does he need? He needs respect. He needs peace. He needs intimacy. What does the feminine need? The feminine needs to be understood, to feel safe and secure, and to feel loved. And if you're wondering how to meet the person's needs, like really meet their needs, then you've got to start looking at perhaps Gary Chapman's love languages, and you've got to speak their language. Because if you love them the way that you want to be loved, and you're not speaking their language, you're thinking you're meeting their needs, but you're not actually meeting their needs. For example, my friend has a need for physical touch. That's his love language. He feels love whenever they're touching or intimate or doing that sort of thing. Cuddling, smacking each other's backsides, whatever. But she has a need for gifts. So her greatest need is for him to bring her gifts. But he thinks the gift that he can give her is to cuddle her. That's not meeting her love language. That's meeting his love language. And so sometimes we project our love language onto other people. Does everyone know about Gary Chapman and the love languages? You've heard of that? Yeah, good. So we've got physical touch, we've got words of affirmations, we've got, help me out, so we've got visual is a gift, auditory is words of affirmation, kinesthetic is physical touch, you've then got quality time, you've then got acts of service. So they're the 5. Okay, so we meet those needs. Meet the love language of the other person, not the one that we communicate in. And that's very, very difficult sometimes for people to do, especially when you feel like your needs aren't getting met. But honestly, if you want a great relationship, okay, and the other thing is, before you can meet somebody else's needs, you've got to have met your own needs. And this is where personal development comes into it. When we fill up our own cup, we've got more to give. Meet your own needs, then give. So you work on meeting your own needs, then you give everything to your relationship to meet their needs. And I tell you what, and I tell men this all the time, that if women are naturally charitable, they're natural givers, natural nurturers. When you meet a woman's needs, they naturally want to reciprocate. They naturally do that. The trouble is sometimes we lose focus, like I did with Access World, with money. Sometimes I'm so driven in other places that I lose focus on the thing that's the most important to me. And really the quality of our life is the quality of our relationship. There's no exception to that. I really believe that. If we have a great relationship, we can have a phenomenal life. It's so important. It's so important. It affects your health, it affects your well-being, it affects everything else. Everything will be in nice flow if that happens. So what's next? Master the rules. So that's just one of the rules. One of the rules is meet the needs. That's it. But there's a lot more rules. I wish it was that simple. Just do that, that's it. There's a lot more rules. We need to discover the rules. We need to find out what the rules are. And I haven't got time here to go through every rule of relationships. There's books and books and books. And also, each person and individual is different and will have different needs. And will have different rules. And so you've got let's talk about a relationship with a man and a woman. You've got a man who's got the set of rules of a relationship that he's learned unconsciously from his parents. Between the ages of 0 to 7 is where we learn 80% of everything we'll ever know. And we learn all of this unconsciously. And so you bring these rules of the way you're raised and the rules of your family into a relationship with another person. And she's there, and between the ages of 0 to 7, she learnt all the rules of her family unconsciously. And all these rules came into her mind and heart without effort. It just was. And so now you're together and suddenly you've got different rules. And so we need discussion. We need to talk. We need to work out which rules we want to keep, which rules we want to discard, and which rules we want to invent and create. Because we want to create something different or even better than what our parents had. And so that's what we do. We create our own rules. Now, if you just follow the rules of your parents and they just follow the rules, that's why we get so much friction. He's got all these rules that don't match. And suddenly, no, you're supposed to, when you get angry, you're not supposed to walk away. You're supposed to yell at each other for 20 minutes, get it out, and then you're okay. And the other person goes, no. When you yell, I go away and sit in a corner, I think, for 20 minutes, and then I'm okay. And so you've got two people with two different rules. And so one's yelling and one's going and sitting in the corner, and you're like, what are you doing? You're not doing it. You're supposed to yell back. Once you yell back, then we argue about it for a while, and then we resolve it, and then we make love. And it's all resolved. And the other one's going, no, that's not how it works. You go away, I sit in the corner for 20 minutes, I resolve it in my mind, and then we come back together, and then everything's going to be okay. Different rules. We'd understand that. Understand that people are different. Now, can we change the rules? Absolutely. And who has the key to them? You do. You have control over every rule. But most of them you don't even know they're happening because they're happening below the surface of conscious thought. And so you've got this tension in your relationship and you don't even know why it's there. How do you resolve it? Oh, I don't know what it is. You've got to identify it. Like I said before, a problem well stated is a problem half solved. We've got to identify it, we've got to bring it out, we've got to then state it or get it in a nutshell statement. The problem is whatever it is. Once we've got it, we're halfway to solving it. Once we've identified what it is, we're halfway there. Then all we're going to do is simply notice when we're doing it and make some changes. Oh, I don't want to do that. How do I do this differently? And then we start making those changes, and it's step by step. Like I said, you couldn't brush your teeth unconsciously. Changing these things and doing it unconsciously, difficult. So that's why we need help. How do we get help? Well, there's a system called NLP. Who's heard of NLP? Neuro-linguistic programming. And what neuro-linguistic programming is all about is making changes at an unconscious level, so that you find yourself acting in new ways without conscious awareness necessarily. And that's where change happens, in the unconscious part of our mind. And so NLP is really great tool. It's not the only tool that I use, but it's a really great tool for reprogramming the mind. Think of your mind like a computer, and your operating system's set, but you can put in new programs. You see, they say that the operating system, there's not much we can do about it. But you can install new programs, and that's what we're doing. And you can get rid of or delete programs that are no good. If they're not serving you, we can get rid of them, and we can install them. You say, well, how do you do that? Okay, through processes and tools, what we do, NLP really does three things. What it does is, one is dissolve or resolve or solve limiting beliefs. So any limiting beliefs that you have where you say, this isn't possible, or I can't do that, or I can't do this. Any limiting, within reason. I mean, you're not going to stand there flapping your arms and start flying. You're not going to resolve that limiting belief, but a limiting belief that you believe that you can't have a good relationship, or whatever the case may be. It's a limiting belief. That's what these tools will actually help you to resolve. You'll start to believe it. In fact, we had an experience just a couple of weeks ago where you had a thoughts and feelings, and we made some changes. I used a technique, and straight away there was a change. There was a difference. You believe differently. You want to just share with everyone what happened?
I was basically feeling a bit down from my separation.
Yep.
And you just rattle my head, run inside, and just surface it out of my body
Yeah,
and get a positive difference.
yeah. And how long did the process take?
A few minutes.
Yeah, and so it's just something to get the mind thinking in a new way. And what you do is you give it a push or give it a bit of help along. And the tools are really good for this. You've got to realise as well, not anybody can use these tools the same way. Not everybody does use them the same way, because one part of it is the skill of either the hypnotist or the person doing the tool, using the tool. And the other part of it is their belief system, because that matters a great deal. See, if I don't believe it's going to work, then chances of it working for you are very small. Whereas I know this works. It's like, it's not even a question in my mind. I know that any limiting belief that you have, within reason, can be resolved. So that's the first thing NLP does. It resolves limiting beliefs. Another one is that it gets rid of values conflicts. When you've got a values conflict where you want to go right, but half of you is pulling you in another direction. You want to make a lot of money, but you're lazy. You want to, whatever the case, but you want to be fit and healthy, but you really love chocolate cake. You've got all these values conflicts inside, and you feel as though you're being stretched. Like you really want that, but every time that chocolate cake comes nearby, oh, I'd love a piece of chocolate cake. And before you know it, you've had a piece of chocolate cake every day, and you look down and the waistline hasn't changed. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, values conflicts. And the third one is repressed emotions. And that's what you were talking or describing, was there was an emotion and it was feeling trapped inside, and all we did was we let it go, we released it. Once an emotion's released, your whole frame, your whole body can feel differently. And that's what you experienced.
For my separation from seeing my kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, not seeing my kids.
Yeah, and I went through something similar, so I know exactly what you're going through in a couple of fronts. Okay, and it's one of the toughest things to go through, is feeling separated and estranged from them. And yeah, it's tough. Excellent, so that's what NLP is. Let's go to E. Now what is E? I was going to put endure to the end, but I think it's more enjoy. So enjoy to the end. And that's how we do it. We get a big enough why, we adopt a winning psychology, and then there's tools that we can use to do that, create a winning psychology and get our mindset such that we actually believe it's not just possible but probable. It's actually going to we have a conviction that it's actually going to work. That's the sort of level of psychology we need, and there's tools that we can use to get that. And so I wake up every morning, and my first thing, I spend 2 hours in the morning from 4 till 6, and my objective is to get my psychology sky high. I spend 2 hours working on myself, and I do a number of things. There's a 12-step morning routine that I go through. It's a ritual. It's become, like I said, habits are the only things that work. If you don't make it a habit, if it doesn't become part of your life, part of your mind, heart, body, spirit and soul, if it doesn't become part of every part of you, then at some point it'll fall away and you go, not today. So I decided that it had to be every day. Had to be every day. And my goal is actually 25 times a month, but I always exceed it. I always do more than 25 times. But that's my goal. And that's 2 hours a day, an hour and a half to 2 hours. Pushing myself, mind, body, spirit, every part of me. Exercise is one of those steps. I do incantations and all sorts of things. But having done that for 3 years, it's absolutely transformed everything in my life, including my relationships. So having a winning psychology, not physiology, having a winning psychology helps. It's such a big step. Then mastering the rules. Now once you've got the psychology, you're going to have more energy to invest in the rules. In fact, another little ritual I started now in talking about the love language, my wife's love language is physical touch, which is great because there's a compatibility, because I love physical touch also. But I decided that I would meet her love language to the highest level. And so I decided that, every time I go past her, it's a kiss, it's a smack on the backside, whatever, in the kitchen. At night time, I also give her a 10-minute massage every night. And I've been doing that now for about 8 months without fail. every night that I can. If she's asleep or I'm asleep before she gets to bed, that happens occasionally. But every night I'm there, no matter how tired I am, I push myself to get up on her back and start rubbing her back. I push myself. I make it a must. I make it so essential. I make it feel like that's the most important thing that I have to do to save my relationship, to make it not just good or great, but phenomenal.